Evening, everyone, and welcome to this evening's England Football Learning webinar. Tonight's webinar is exploring how we might use insights from the Women's Euro to support Euro players. I'm absolutely delighted that we've got a great panel of guests to join me this evening. We'll get cracking because we've got plenty to get through. My name's Conal. I'll be playing as your host this evening, and I'm delighted to be joined by four experts in James, John, Emily, and Darren, who have got a real breadth of expertise and experiences across the game, and they'll be able to bring that insight and share that with you this evening. So this evening we'll cover three main themes as we always do in these webinars. Our first theme will be exploring what kind of the key goal scoring insights were from this summer's Women's Euros. James has done a fantastic piece of work exploring the goal scoring themes from the tournament, and he'll be bringing that to life as our first theme. We'll then be diving into what the role of moving with the ball plays in goal scoring, bringing to life some of the recent goals from the Women's Super League. And then finally, we'll be looking at how we can actually support players to develop their ability to move with the ball, particularly with a lens on goal scoring. And the panel will be sharing some example practicals that they've used with their players to develop that. Without further ado, we'll get cracking and dive into this evening's webinar.
So I've got some slides here on the goal scoring analysis, and I'm sure you all know already it was a record-breaking tournament with 106 goals scored. So the visual on the left-hand side with all the circles on it is all the goals, and the blue ones are the open play goals, which you can see takes up the majority. So just for the rest of the analysis and the insights tonight, we're just going to look at the open play goals. So 78 open play goals. It just removes any variances or any biases from set plays, from any penalties or own goals, which might affect any of the coaching considerations we try and draw from these insights. Some good stats here, really, really important stuff. 88% of goals were scored from inside the box. That's something that's consistent we've seen with previous tournaments. With the WSL, that's always really high, and that's an important figure for us. You can see there, the bottom left corner is really high, same with the bottom right, but particularly the bottom third of the goal. That's where the goals are going in past the goalkeepers. We looked at the foot that was used for a left foot or right foot finish. So was it a dominant or a weak foot? And interestingly here that there is more goals by a dominant foot, but with a weak foot just under 30%, it does show the importance of incorporating and encouraging your players to use the weak foot within the practices that you put on. So those are some key takeaway and some real headline stats from the tournament. What I'm going to go through now is the goal location, the finishing techniques that the players used, and then how many touches they took to finish. What I'll do is I'll start off by going through each of these three variables in isolation, but where the real good insight comes out is when I start to combine these variables together, and then you can see how the insights change. This is where the goals were scored from, and the darker the color and the higher the number obviously means more goals were scored from in that zone. Really, really important stat for us here is that over 50% of goals were scored inside the width of the goal and also inside the 18-yard box. Now that zone accounts for 60% of goals scored within that area, and there's loads of great implications for coaching and coaching considerations when we're thinking about how can we support our players to get into the right areas to finish from. These are some real key zones that the data is highlighting in the top level that is really, really key for where the goals are going in. Moving on now to the number of touches taken to score. So a first time finish was the highest from the tournament with 31 goals. And a second touch finish was the second highest with 16 goals. In terms of which finishing technique was used, the strike technique, where the players were trying to generate power to beat the goalkeeper, was the highest, with an inside foot as being the second highest, where it's more of that pass finish, really precise, picking your spot. I mentioned at the start about looking at each of those in isolation, which is what we've just seen. But now I'm going to start to combine these variables together. So the first ones I'll combine will be the finishing techniques and the number of touches taken. On the bottom of your screen there, you'll see the number of touches taken to score, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5+. And then the height of the bar is how many goals were scored from those number of touches. So the yellow bars will be your strike and the blue bars will be inside foot. What we can see is that an inside foot technique is much more common within a one-touch finish, and then a strike technique is much more common after multiple touches have been taken. So there's loads of great connections that can be made from this insight into the coaching practices. On the left, you can see that strike is taken further out compared to where an inside foot is much closer. And you've got some visuals down there at the bottom, some examples from the tournament. Now, if you think back to one of the earlier slides I presented on the 6-yard box and second 6-yard box, the majority of inside foot goals fall within that region. So 86% of inside foot goals fall within the 6-yard box or the second 6-yard box.
Thanks, James. Appreciate that. What we're going to do now then is dive into the 6 capabilities. And those of you who were on the last webinar around game formats will remember how we discussed using the 6 capabilities as a tool for observing players and being able to identify what a player's strength is and what area of their development might be. John, I'm going to bring you in here, if that's okay, to discuss this. What might the 6 capabilities look like from a finishing perspective?
From a finishing point of view, I think we've got real variety in the 9s that we've got coming through the pathway, but there was some real differences in the way that goals are scored in the Euros that really helped us pick that off with the players around like what really we were trying to challenge them with. If you think about the goals that the 2 goals Michel Adjeman scored, who's obviously a huge inspiration for our young players coming through the pathway right now. The 1-touch finish, which was instinctive around the goal, or the 2-touch finish where she showed real composure, and with different parts of the feet and things like that. So, as I said, we tried to break that down. So when we thought about these in terms of linking it to these 6 capabilities, when we're looking at our young players coming through right now, I think like scanning really sat in around like trying to identify and understand where the spaces are to exploit first and foremost, what the defensive shape looks like, where your supporting players are, and how our players were able to assess what we're doing with the ball, and then how they could exploit spaces, how they could understand where they could gain an advantage in and around those areas of the box where you can see there's a real high value in determining which parts of the area they can get into to affect the goal. We tend to find, like at the age and stage, the players tend to want to occupy spaces in the box. So around like that positioning, maybe to occupy it first, to then think about how you can then move and exploit. The main thing around the body shape we challenged our players with on that particular camp was around being in a position where they're always able to face the ball and the goal almost, so that if the ball's wide, anything that drops in and around like that Michel Adjeman goal that I referred to against Sweden is so instinctive. But she achieves that by being in the right area at the right time, but also that her body shape enables her to just step onto the ball and strike it with any part of the foot that's going to prod that ball towards goal in that moment. But the movement piece then is for me is really important around how. So initially, where does the movement take them around? Again, in relation to the ball, are they moving onto the blind side to challenge the decision making of the opponent? Are they able to accelerate and exploit different spaces through a change of direction or a change of pace in those spaces as well? When it comes to techniques, I think this is something we're really exploring at the moment, particularly in the talent pathway space. We have an initiative that's kicking off this season called Finding Our Finishers, which has had a bit of attention recently. So people may have heard of that, but it's something we're doing where we're trying to explore the capabilities of our players to just get into character and find different ways to finish in and around the box. Tend to try and allow repetition and opportunities for players to practice shooting, where they might go play a little 1-2 and they touch and finish, or the ball's played in and they've got to step on and finish. But actually, if you relate it to the game, there's so many variables around whether it's a bobbling ball, whether it's played in, fizzed in at shin height, whether it's played in front of them, whether it's played into their feet and it's punched in, or if they've got an opportunity to step onto the ball, if it's a rebound and it's coming off at an awkward angle, what the position of the keeper is, if the keeper's closing the space, if the keeper's held the ground, the angle of the shot, and so on. So many different things that are going to affect the type of technique that you want to use. So again, linking back to practice design, all we've really tried to do is create so many different random situations where the players are challenged to finish on 1 or 2 touch. So they've got an opportunity to recognise different moments in different situations, in different games in and around the box, where they're going to have to find different ways of finishing with power or with finesse or whatever it is.
When we think of finishing, I think when coaches think of putting on practices for finishing, it can be really safe and really easy to want to lean into unopposed practices where we know we can keep control of the technical side of it and keep things really clean for players. We have to make it messy for players because that's the reality when they go into the game. It's going to feel a little bit messy for them as well. So they need the repetition of that. So thinking about things like delivery type, are we giving them a variety of different types of delivery into the box, into those spaces where it is going to be quite tight for them and they have to react within a quick split second of a moment? Are we thinking about different delivery locations? So are they always starting in the same place? Is the direction of the ball always coming from the same space? If it is, they're probably not gaining enough variety to be able to react and adjust to the different situations as well.
Insight is sort of a gateway to where we might end up. It tells us loads of information, but it's really important to understand that the context of James's analysis is not necessarily the direct impact on the kids and the players that you're going to be working with. However, it tells us so much information with regards to the likelihood of places where goals are scored, the percentages, and that's information that's really vital. An example being exactly as Emily was talking, if we know that lots of goals are scored in a certain area, right at the top level of the game, then we've got to trust that somebody has thought long and hard about they're the type of goals that we're trying to create. So when we're planning our sessions, whether it's with the under 7s, under 8s, under 18s, it's about us getting the players into habits to come up with ideas of how to solve the same problems that they will get to as they progress through. The other really important bit about the insights is it informs other parts of the game. There was a great comment, I wish I'd written down who wrote it, about if this is where we know the defending's starting to happen because they're stopping goals, do we have to work on goals from further out? And they're questions that they're brilliant questions because that's the game that we all fall in love with. So it's up to you individually as a coach to think, what problems am I trying to solve? But really hammering home the point that Emily made about, do we coach what we're trying to get, or do we coach the topic? Final example I'd say on that is, I see it all the time. Just before the game, just before match practice, we do the play in, the setback, the shot from the edge of the box. But realistically, if you look at James's stats, it's, are we preparing players just before a game for that second 6-yard box where most goals are scored?
I'm sure there'll be a lot of coaches on the call that may not get training sessions in the week with their players, or may get one training session, and you're trying to make that as fun as possible whilst also embedding some support to the players and coaching them in ways that you know are going to help them as they're developing and as they go through their journey. So we've tried to stay really principle based around like moments that are going to help the players regardless of like what the situation is on the pitch. So we have a set of principles, and I won't go through all of them, but ultimately, like from an individual point of view, we want the players to be brave and dominate their duels. So there might be times where we commit a lot of numbers forward and we leave ourselves a little bit exposed at the back. But as long as we're player for player in that instance, we just want that player to understand how to take responsibility in their individual duel to dominate that battle. So that might be the first thing, where the training session we might not have time to cover, like dealing with all these different scenarios that are gonna come out in the game. But we'd have an element of like dominating duels, so that player's got some responsibility on the pitch around like what their role might be in that situation if they find themselves a little bit exposed and they're trying to defend the space. When this did happen in this fixture against Denmark, we did have a bit of time to adapt a training session the next day. So in that example, we focused on one of our other out of possession principles, which is ball on the way, team on the way. So that if the ball's moving, the team should be moving in relation to that and keeping relevant distances to the ball. So we were trying to make sure that the players understood the importance of that as the ball moves sideways, but also backwards and forwards, so that they're managing that space, whether it's across the pitch or in behind, or obviously keeping the distances relevant in front as well. But also then thinking about the team as a whole, understanding the role of the goalkeeper and how they can support in supporting and managing that space and reducing the size of the space that the opposition have got to play into.
The bit that I want to kind of talk about is one of the most underused things, in my opinion, is using pitch geography. And when you're deciding on what your practice is, sometimes, and I'm not going to sit here, I know that a lot of us are in privileged positions where we do get half a 3G pitch, but I also know, having come through grassroots, that you might have a middle of a third, or you might only get a corner of a pitch for half your session. So it's understanding where you are on the pitch, and can you make it look like a game during the practice. Now, I'm not necessarily saying it has to be fully opposed, small-sided games. What I am saying is, if you're going to talk about assists, are you doing it with the goal in the picture? Are you doing it in the final third? Is it a case that one week you might have to have a chat with another coach who's on a different section of the pitch and say, right, okay, a little bit of bargaining, can I have that for this time? Because all of the information that we've got about how to develop practices, I think Emily and John have covered it really well. It's more a case of, can we think about how are we making this into a situation that these players are going to be able to make the connections to link it back to when they're actually playing in the game.
We'll move on to our second theme now, which is diving into what the actual role of moving with the ball is within goal scoring. So we'll hand over to James, who's got some more data for us.
Thanks, Conal. So this is a graph that I've showed you earlier on tonight with the number of touches taken by the goal scorer and just a different lens on it now. So rather than focusing on those first and second touch finishes, which we know are the most common, there's still an element of being able to move with the ball, taking 3, 4, 5 or more touches to be able to score. Again, when we look at number of touches taken by assisters, it's still skewed towards those first time and 2-touch assists, but it's more prominent for a 3-touch, 4-touch, 5 or more assist than it is for the goal scorer. So it's up to 47% now. Again, really, really important for players to have the capabilities to be able to do that right at the top level, and then them being able to have developed that earlier on in their pathway.
Yeah, and I find it really interesting with moving with the ball when we talk about the capabilities, particularly scanning, because it's so unique that how much we're asking players to scan whilst they're on the ball. That becomes the real uniqueness of moving with the ball for me. So being able to get your head up, get your head down, to be able to see what you're going to do with the ball at your feet, but also be aware of everything else going on around you. So that awareness piece that we all know is so important at the early stages of a player's development becomes vital. Your positioning, obviously, it's huge. Before we're receiving the ball, we need to make sure we understand what is going on around us, and to be able to do that, our positioning becomes really important. The body angle and shape of our body to be able to receive the ball, to set ourselves up well enough to be ready to move with it in the way that we intend to do so. So all these decisions are going through the player's mind before they've even got onto the ball, so that they can be the most optimal when they get it. Movement, of course, a vital part of being able to move with the ball. So the speed that they're moving with it, that change of pace, trying to draw the defender in, and then picking your timing to be able to change your pace again, to either get beyond them or get round the player. Techniques, we spoke about it earlier. There's a variety of different ways that we might receive it before we start moving with it ourselves. We might receive it back to goal. So what does the touches look like for us to be able to get away from the player and start to go forward? Has the player already scanned to be able to decide whether they can turn to go forward, or if that movement has to come backwards to get space away from the player? So many different variables going on for the players to make decisions on things. Timing, we spoke about it a moment ago, that speed, that timing of deception. So linking the two together, the timing of when you're going to feint to try and get past the player and then change pace to be able to go and get beyond.
I think that's something to be celebrated in players where they've got that real bravery. Like, again here, scanning, recognizing that they can turn out and travel with the ball, then to commit a player and then release. And that's then your decision making, isn't it? Around all those capabilities linking together to recognise when to stay on it, when to commit players, when to release, or when to shoot and score a screamer from 25 yards, and that all starts to come together. But that has to come through players being almost afforded that freedom to make those decisions, to make those mistakes in their processes as they go through their youth development, so that they can get on this, on this stage in the WSL and showcase what they can do.
Absolutely. Fearless.
Yeah.
So cool. What we're going to get into now is kind of the real detail of how we can actually support players and develop players that can move with the ball from both a practice design perspective and a match day perspective. So Darren, Emily, and John have pulled together some practices that they've used in their environments to work on this topic. Darren, I'll hand over to you. Your challenge is to do this in about a minute and a half, if you can, just to explain the practice that you've designed.
I cannot take any credit for designing this. This is the reason why I picked this one to highlight is because this is probably one that I learned when I was first starting to coach. This is an old youth module, and those of you who've been on the UAPC recently may have seen it. Skills Corridor, again, go and have a look at it on the England Foot website, on YouTube. There's some brilliant versions of this. The concept of it, essentially, 30 seconds. The Blues move with the ball down through the corridor. The Yellows are practicing passing backwards and forwards, different techniques moving through it. The Blues are unopposed to the extent of they're just going from one end to the other. Loads of different touches of the ball, loads of different movements. But there is interference from the Yellows coming in. You can adapt it by the Yellows aiming to try and maybe knock the ball. So it's about timing. You can do it so maybe the Yellows are allowed inside the mid zone. The bit that I wanted to come on to next, though, really quickly, is how we use it into in a practice that makes it relevant to the kids. So you'll notice on the screen, what I've done, pitch geography, spoke about earlier. I've decided that we're going to do driving with the ball, and when we get through the zone, there's a finishing zone for my players to be able to take a shot or to assist, depending on what I'm working on that week. But the point of the practice is that I want an outcome. The point of the practice is that this is most like what they would do in game day. Going back to James's analysis, I've aimed it so they're breaking into that second 6-yard box. So that's the most likely time to happen to it. Again, this slide is available when the recording comes out. But it's just thinking about your practice. What is the point of it, and why is it going to help the players during game time, during match time? Because at the end of the day, that's where they wanted to really try and improve.
So a 2v1 varied finishing waves practice. So quite self-explanatory in terms of the setup. You've got 3 teams, Yellows starting with the ball, Blues at the opposite side. They won't be involved in the first wave. And then once the first wave has ended, either in a goal or a different action, then the Blues will wave in as well. So the Purples are the defending team to start with. They will be that for 4 minutes. And in essence, what we're wanting from this situation is in the 2v1, you can see that we've got 2 varied end zones. So depending which direction you're shooting, and this will change, they'll all change roles throughout the practice. So after their 4 minutes, they'll try something new. But as the Yellows go beyond that first defender in a 2v1, their aim is to try and combine to get into the 10-yard end zone. Now, I stress the 10-yard end zone because that 10-yard piece is really important to link back to what James was speaking about earlier about insights. So if I just flick on a slide, because you'll all be able to understand the setup and the aims when you look back at this. So instead, more the importance behind why I've designed it, how I've designed it. I tend to split it more into what we'd call maybe an octagon. Because look, for me, those 6 and 5s on the outskirts of that central channel are just as important. I think there's a lot of goals that can be scored from them areas as well. So the practice that you've just seen on the other allows for loads of repetitions in that second 6-yard and just in towards the edge of the 18-yard box. But then when you go in the other direction, it's a completely different challenge.
John, your practice is hot off the press because you delivered it last night. I'll just bring the animation up and I'll let you talk over it.
Yeah, that's right. So you can see it playing as we go. But if as you look at it, you'll see there's 2 balls in the practice. So once the ball's been progressed into the middle zone, where players can come and get on the ball, the whites get a ball again at the top. So there's always an element of the players having to try and keep the ball at one end until it's on to progress. We have a couple of individual characteristics that we're really trying to drive in the young age group. So one is to be able to play under pressure, and the other one is to be able to progress play. But we wanted them to consider the methods at which they could progress play. So in this, they've got the option of recognising when it's on to play forwards to players that drop between lines, and then can they turn out and drive at a 2v1 into a 2v1 or a 2v2 at the other end. Can a player step out of that top end zone and travel out with the ball if it's on for them to travel out? Or can they step into that middle zone, but then maybe play like some sort of back and through to get like a third man run on the opposite side with another supporting player coming in? So I know there's a bit of chaos going in with this video. There's like 3 progressions built into this animation, and it probably made way more sense on the pitch yesterday than it does you're watching the video now. But ultimately, it's about players, as I say, trying to assess moments where they can decide on the methods of how they're going to progress play. The Reds also had an opportunity to attack the big goal at the top end if they won the ball and attack the goal in transition, or as an outlet to the mini goals on the right hand side as well. So there was some directional play for the defending team too.
I think we're there. So all that's left for me to do is to say thanks very much for joining us this evening. We're delighted to have your company and your engagement. Hope you took a lot away from the webinar. And a huge thank you to our panel as well for being so insightful and open. And we look forward to seeing you on the next webinar.